There is a seductive lie that the world often whispers in our ears. Just grind yourself to dust, and the universe will eventually reward you. We grow up with the ingrained belief that busyness is the yardstick of success, and exhaustion is a badge of honor. But pause for a moment. If brute physical effort were the only key to unlocking wealth, why isn't the donkey, the beast carrying the heaviest load, the king of the jungle? Why is it that you, perhaps the first to arrive at the office and the last to leave, sometimes feel like you're running on a treadmill? Sweat pouring, heart racing, yet your feet remain planted in the exact same spot. To answer that question, let me tell you the story of Thomas. In a certain valley, where families had clung to the soil for generations, lived a 32-year-old farmer named Thomas. He inherited a modest 10-acre farm from his father. But the heaviest inheritance wasn't the land. It was an ironclad belief, an obsolete operating system hardwired deep into his psyche. Hard work is the only honest path. Thomas's day began at 4 a.m., while darkness still blanketed the valley and cold dew clung to the grass. He refused to use modern plows or irrigation systems, dismissing them as costly indulgences for the lazy. He tilled the earth with his bare hands, sowed every seed with obsessive precision, and hauled every bucket of water manually. In psychology, we call Thomas's state the martyr complex. This occurs when a person subconsciously believes that their own suffering, sacrifice, and toil will automatically transmute into moral virtue or success. Thomas wasn't just farming. He was performing a ritual of self-flagellation. From sunrise to sunset, his hands were calloused, cracked, and bleeding. His back ached as if it were about to snap. At night, he would collapse into bed, too tired to eat a proper meal, too drained to look into the eyes of his beloved wife, Sarah. Sarah would look at him with worry. "Thomas, you're killing yourself. There has to be a better way." But Thomas would just shake his head, his eyes blinded by resolve. "Sarah, success requires sacrifice. I just need to push a little harder." Thomas didn't know it, but he was digging a hole, not to plant a tree, but to bury his own future.
Just across the fence line from Thomas lay a completely different world, belonging to his neighbor, Richard. Richard was the same age, owned the same amount of land, and had even started with less capital. But if Thomas's life was a bleak, black and white tragedy, Richard's life was a vibrant, peaceful Technicolor film. The paradox was this: Richard started his workday at 8 a.m., when the sun was already high, and finished by 2 p.m., a mere 6 hours. He utilized automated irrigation, hired seasonal labor during harvest, and spent his afternoons reading, sipping tea on the porch, or walking with his family. While Thomas wrestled with every weed, sweat soaking through his shirt, Richard was sitting down, calculating soil pH levels and analyzing market price trends. The result? Richard's farm was perpetually lush, yielding double the harvest of Thomas's. This reality haunted Thomas every night. He gazed at the warm glow of Richard's house with a mix of admiration and bitter envy. From the perspective of Stoic philosophy, the difference between these two men wasn't diligence. It was the distinction between motion and action. Thomas was the embodiment of motion, always busy, always running back and forth, always doing something. That busyness gave him a false sense of progress. Like a stationary bike in a gym, wheels spinning furiously, rider exhausted, but the bike hasn't moved an inch. Richard, conversely, focused on action, Deliberate behaviors that produced tangible results. He didn't try to look busy. He built processes so that things ran themselves. Thomas believed a farmer's value was measured by the volume of sweat dropped on the soil. Richard believed value was measured by the number of seeds that actually sprouted. Two men, two mindsets, living side by side under the same sky. But Thomas's sky was about to collapse, for a brutal drought was approaching the valley, bringing the ultimate test for his blind faith. That summer, a brutal drought descended upon the valley like a curse. Water became liquid gold. The earth cracked open like gaping wounds waiting for rain that would never come. This was the moment the line between effort and strategy became the line between life and death. Faced with crisis, Thomas reacted the only way he knew how. He worked even more frantically. He decided to wake at 3 a.m. instead of 4 a.m. He walked further, hauling heavy buckets from a distant drying well, making 50 trips a day under the scorching sun. His body screamed in protest, muscles cramping in agony, but he gritted his teeth, chanting his familiar mantra like a sleepwalker. Hard work pays off. The heavens won't forsake a dedicated heart. Psychologically, Thomas had fallen into the trap of tunnel vision, also known as the scarcity mindset. When humans are hyper-focused on an immediate lack, in this case water, their cognitive bandwidth shrinks. They lose the ability to see the big picture. Thomas no longer had the mental capacity to think of solutions. He only had enough energy to think about the next bucket. Meanwhile, Richard didn't panic. He simply adjusted his irrigation system to run at night, the coolest hours, to minimize evaporation. He did less, but his water retention was higher. On the 15th day of this uneven battle, the string finally snapped. As Thomas struggled to lift his 40th bucket of the day, the world around him tilted and went dark. His legs gave out. The bucket slipped from his grip, precious water spilling onto the dusty ground, vanishing in an instant as if it never existed. Thomas collapsed amidst rows of dying crops. His heart beat irregularly, his breath ragged. He lay there, face pressed against the dirt, tasting the salt of his sweat and the bitterness of failure. The doctor was clear. "Mr. Thomas, your body is shutting down. You are severely dehydrated, exhausted, and your heart is at its limit. If you continue like this, you won't see the next harvest. Not because of the drought, but because you will be dead." That night, lying in a hospital bed with an IV drip in his thin arm, Thomas stared blankly at the ceiling. For the first time in his life, he felt a defeat that didn't come from the elements, but from his soul. He whispered to Sarah, his voice cracking, "I did everything Father taught me. I worked harder than anyone. Why am I still failing?" The question hung in the silent air, more painful than any physical wound. 3 days later, when his legs were steady enough to hold his weight, Thomas did something his pride had prevented for years. He walked over to his neighbor's house. Richard opened the door, showing neither arrogance nor pity, only a genuine, welcoming smile. They sat on the porch overlooking Richard's verdant fields, a heartbreaking contrast to Thomas's barren land. "Richard," Thomas's voice lowered, humble for the first time, "I need to understand. I work double your hours. I pour blood and tears into the soil. But you do less, yet harvest twice as much. What is the secret?" Richard remained silent for a moment, then led Thomas to the tool shed. He picked up 2 axes, one old with a chipped and dull blade, the other gleaming and razor sharp. Imagine two woodcutters competing to fell trees, Richard began, his voice taking on the cadence of an ancient fable. The first woodcutter believes results are proportional to sweat. He swings his axe continuously for 12 hours, never resting, never stopping. As the blade dulls, he swings harder. He wrestles with the tree, gasping for air, hands blistered, but every strike leaves only a shallow scratch on the bark. Richard handed the dull axe to Thomas and pointed to a thick log. "Try it." Thomas swung. Thud! The axe bounced off, vibrating painfully in his hands, the wood barely marked. Richard continued. The second woodcutter works only 8 hours, but every hour he stops for 10 minutes to sharpen his axe. The first man mocks him for being lazy, but by the end of the day, the second man has felled twice as many trees with half the effort. Richard took the sharp axe and swung lightly. Crack! The blade bit deep into the grain, slicing through like a knife through butter. Thomas, you are the first woodcutter. You have been swinging a dull axe for years. You think you are persevering, but in reality, you are just punishing yourself. Richard walked Thomas through his farm, explaining the law of leverage. 1. Systems beat muscle. I don't haul water in buckets. I build pipelines. I spent money and effort once to build it, but now it works for me even while I sleep. 2. Focus beats busyness, essentialism. You grow 5 different crops and tend to them superficially. I chose the 2 crops best suited for this soil and became a master of them. You chose diverse mediocrity. I chose focused excellence. 3. Rest is strategy. A tired brain makes expensive decisions. I rest to sharpen my thinking. When I work with 100% clarity. You work in a zombie state, and your mistakes cost more time to fix than it took to make them. Thomas stood frozen. Richard's words were not a critique, but a revelation. For the first time, he understood. Laziness isn't just doing nothing. Sometimes frantic work is also a form of laziness. Laziness of thought. Thomas returned home that twilight, his mind teeming with questions, and his heart rekindled with something new. Hope. Instead of rushing to the fields like a mindless drone, he sat down at the dinner table, opening a fresh notebook in front of Sarah. Teach me how to rethink everything, he said to his wife. I no longer want to be just a pair of working hands. I want to be a thinking head. The next morning, Thomas committed a revolutionary act. He worked in the field for exactly 4 hours, then stopped. He didn't sleep. He used that void of time to research. He visited the agricultural center, dug through documents, and calculated costs. 2 weeks later, a truck arrived to haul away the old plow Thomas rarely used, but kept out of sentimental attachment. In economics, this is called escaping the sunk cost fallacy. He used that money to install a basic drip irrigation system. When the system began to operate, a magical sound filled the air. The soft trickle of water flowing directly to the roots. No noise, no sweat, no struggle. A task that once devoured 6 hours of his day now took 20 minutes to check the valves. Thomas used the surplus time to apply the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. He boldly eliminated 3 inefficient crops, keeping only the 2 that were best suited to the soil and commanded the highest market price. Instead of being an average farmer in 5 areas, he chose to become an expert in 2. But the real miracle wasn't in the furrows of the field. It was at the family dinner table. For the first time in years, Thomas was fully present at dinner. He didn't collapse from exhaustion. He listened to Sarah's stories. He played with his children. His presence was the healing balm for the fractures in his family. He started exercising in the mornings, not to punish his body, but to fuel it. 6 months later, the harvest arrived. Thomas's fields, now organized and scientifically irrigated, yielded 40% more than his best year in the past. He worked 7 hours a day instead of 15, but every hour was a golden hour of focus and clarity. Richard stopped by, walking through the heavy-laden rows. He nodded, his eyes twinkling with recognition. "You've learned the lesson, my friend. Now you are not just a hard worker, you are a smart worker." Thomas clasped his neighbor's hand, gratitude swelling in his chest. He realized that the most important axe he had to sharpen in his life was his own mind. Thomas's story isn't just about farming. It is a mirror reflecting the lives of you and me. People living in an era that worships busyness. We often buy into a false equation, suffering equals success, that if you aren't exhausted, you aren't trying hard enough. But the truth, the naked truth that hustle culture often hides, is this: hard work is a prerequisite, but it has never been the guarantee. The most successful people in the world aren't the ones putting in the most hours. They are the ones whose hours are the most expensive in terms of value. Remember these 3 core principles from Thomas's transformation to apply to your own work today. 1. Systems over effort. Before diving headfirst into the grind, pause and ask, is there a way for this to run itself? Don't carry water in buckets if you can build a pipeline. Don't do manually what technology can automate. Don't use brute force to solve an intellectual problem. 2. Focus beats sprawl. Stop trying to do everything. Choose the 2 or 3 things that generate the most value and become a master at them. Excellence in a narrow field always beats mediocrity on a broad scale. 3. Rest is discipline. A tired mind is an error-generating machine. Rest isn't a reward for finishing work. It is the fuel to start work. Stillness is where strategy is born. And here is my challenge to you this week. Look at your to-do list. Find the one task that consumes the most time, but yields the lowest return. Don't try to do it faster. Find a way to do it smarter. Can you use an AI tool to assist? Can you create a template? Or simply, can you eliminate it entirely? Take one afternoon, just one, to sharpen your axe instead of continuing to hack away with a dull blade. Because you were not born to be a machine that runs until it breaks. You are a human with a brilliant mind capable of creating leverage. Remember, strategy always beats exhaustion. Your greatest masterpieces will be created when your mind is sharp, not when your body is broken. Thank you for listening to this story. If you see yourself in the Thomas of the past, leave a comment sharing what axe you plan to sharpen this week. I'll see you in the next story.